Hi everyone, I am Jessie Sheehan and I'm a recipe developer, a cookbook author, and I am Colavita Olive Oil's resident baking expert, particularly baking with olive oil, which I love to do. Today we are making an applesauce cake. It's a loaf cake, it's easy peasy, which is totally my jam because guess what? I just wrote a book on easy peasy baking that's gonna come out in the spring. Anyway, today we're making an applesauce cake. I love this cake because of how easy it is, because it reminds me, or really is, a very fall kind of cake. Apples, but like even a teeny bit easier than baking with apples because it's applesauce. First things first, I want to show you this kind of cool thing that I do with my pan, which is I grease my pan, and today we're using an 8.5 by 4.5 inch pan. Then I like to put my paper in this position and then wait for this. This is amazing. I'm really excited to share it with you. I take little binder clips, you know, that you might buy at an office supply store, and I use those to hold down my pieces of parchment. And that way, it's super easy to lift the cake out, but sometimes in an oven, the long pieces of parchment will like flop on top of the cake and kind of ruin the outside of the cake, so I like to clip them down. Pretty cool, right? We're gonna preheat our oven to 350 degrees, and today I'm using a neutral olive oil, which is fantastic for baking. You can also use a more flavorful olive oil if you want, something that tastes peppery or something that tastes a little fruity. Then I'm gonna add some light brown sugar, but I'm also gonna add a little bit of white sugar. And I'm gonna add my vanilla. I always like to add my vanilla when I add my fat, because fat, carries flavor. So it's a good idea when you're baking to add the flavorful ingredients along with the fat. Well, that's what I'm doing. And I just kind of like to mix this together or whisk it together for about 30 seconds or so. Now we're going to add our eggs, and we're going to have 2 eggs. And I always crack my eggs on the counter. There we go. You can see the batter gets kind of glossy and smooth and a little looser than it was when there was just sugar and oil in there. And really pretty if you ask me. Okay, now we're going to add our applesauce. I like to use unsweetened applesauce in this recipe just because I want to be able to control the sweetness of the cake. And I whisk in the applesauce. Oops, sorry, just splattered. I whisk in the applesauce, and I have to say it smells really good. It smells very appley, very much like fall. I think it would be a great recipe on your Thanksgiving table. You could have this sliced, you could serve it with butter, you could serve it with olive oil. Okay, next thing we're gonna do, and this is kind of cool. I am going to add my leavening and my salt and my spices to the wet ingredients. And I'm gonna do that before I add the flour. And the reason I do this is because all of these ingredients really need to be mixed well, because it helps the cake rise, it helps make a beautiful crumb on the cake, so when you look at a slice of the cake, you don't see a lot of holes, you see a beautiful tight crumb. And what sometimes happens is, when you add these ingredients to your flour, you sometimes overmix. You don't mean to, so if you add them early, the way I'm doing here, you can be super vigorous in your whisking, and you don't have to worry later on when you add your flour, you can just gently fold that flour in. So it's just a cool little trick that I've picked up that I just have kind of incorporated into my baking, doing the flour last. Okay, now once I have incorporated all of the spices, plus the leavening, plus the salt, I add my flour. And you're gonna see, it's just a few gentle folds, and I just do so super, super gently, and I'm just gonna do so until the flour disappears. And you'll see it's a little bit lumpy, that's okay. I saw a little blop of something. I think it was a flour blop. Very technical term, peeps, blop. Now, I'm gonna take that pan that I so nicely prepared for you. Here we go. And I like to scrape, if I can, every little side of that bowl. You can see it's a little bit lumpy. Don't worry at all. All those lumps will disappear while it bakes. And I don't want you to worry about these clips. I don't want you to worry that they're gonna melt in the oven, because they do not. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do before I show you my fancy little trick on the top of my loaf is I'm gonna add a little bit of turbinado sugar, or sugar in the raw, to the top of my cake, because it just adds this beautiful sparkle and crunch. There we go. Now, you know how I was telling you about that little trick I'm gonna show you? Watch this. Take a butter knife and you literally pull the knife through the cake. And there's like a little bit of batter left over, and I just kind of plop that back in. And while this cake bakes, the cake will kind of rise and kind of split right at the crack, and it makes the most beautiful top of your loaf cake. I can't wait to show you. Oh my gosh, peeps, will you look at this gorgeous applesauce cake? And do you see that kind of line right through the center of the cake? That's what I'm talking about. You see my little clips? They held down my paper. I'm now gonna take off my clips. And because of the way that I put the paper into the pan, I can lift my cake right out of my pan. Now, sometimes you might need to run a knife just across the edges here. She baked for about 70 minutes in a 350-degree oven, and I like to rotate the cake at the halfway mark. And it's a good idea. Everybody's oven is a little different. It's possible yours will cook in 68 minutes, or it might take 75 minutes. So you just have to be a little flexible and a little vigilant about checking on your cake. I like to stick a tester right into that crack. And when it comes out with a few moist crumbs, I know the cake is done. I don't like to bake it until there are no crumbs, because I do really want this cake to be moist, which it will be because of that applesauce, because of that olive oil, and it's even better on day 2. The olive oil mixes and melds with all of the other flavors, and the cake is just brilliant about 24 hours after you make it. I hope you will give it a try at home. Again, my name is Jessie Sheehan, and it was really fun making this cake with you.